There was no brilliant hypothesis that this would pivot the business. This was like, bank accounts getting closer to zero. Oh shit, what are we going to do?
Welcome to The Business Model by Inc. I'm Graham Winfrey. Today, we have the inaugural edition of Founder Group Chat. Every Friday on The Business Model, we're going to gather a group of founders to have a candid, in-depth conversation about one of the many pressing topics entrepreneurs are facing. And this time, we're talking about scaling. Specifically, how do you scale your business in the right way? Can you get too big too fast? Joining me are some founders who have had to figure this out for themselves. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Ariela Safira. We recently sold our company, but I was the founder and CEO of Zeera, a mental health care company building a new approach to care.
Hi, I'm Fany Gerson. I am the chef-founder of La Newyorkina, Fan Donuts, and Mijo. La Newyorkina is a company dedicated to sharing the sweetness of Mexico. We make all natural paletas, which are popsicles, ice cream, and sweets. Fan Donuts is a donut shop in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and Mijo is at Pier 57. It's a James Beard curated food hall, and we have a Mexican street food kiosk.
My name is Sarah LaFleur, and I'm the founder and CEO of LaFleur. We are a fashion brand for purposeful women, focusing on designing clothing made out of machine washable and wrinkle-resistant fabrics.
Three founders from three very different industries: food, fashion, and mental health care. What lessons can we learn about scaling that apply across business? That's coming up after a quick message from our sponsors.
This podcast is brought to you by IHG Business Edge, where small and mid-sized businesses unlock exclusive savings at more than 6,600 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
This week, how to scale in the right way with Fany Gerson, Sarah LaFleur, and Ariela Safira. So we're going to get right into it. We're talking about scaling. Just about every founder wants to scale his or her business eventually, but trying to scale can feel like you're on a knife's edge because you don't want to try to scale too fast too soon, while at the same time, scaling in the wrong way can also be disastrous. Sarah, tell me about LaFleur's bento boxes. I feel like that was born out of maybe trying to grow too fast or too soon, or both?
Yeah, actually, I would say it was the thing that we stumbled upon when we couldn't figure out how to grow. When we first launched the business, it was kind of the heyday of direct-to-consumer businesses, and it felt like everyone made a product and then launched a website, and then the next day you were making millions. And I thought that's what it was going to be like for me. And, we launched the website and very quickly realized, wow, it's really hard to sell things online. And we could always sell clothing in person when we were doing trunk shows. We would literally bring like a rack of our clothes to a hotel suite or someone's apartment, and customers would always buy in person. So we had a lot of confidence that the product was good, but it turns out how you sell it online is just as important. And what we noticed was so much of like the decision paralysis that often happens when you're online shopping. You put a bunch of things in your cart and you're like, I don't know, is that the right size? Do I want to get this color? Am I going to wait for something else to come up? And so really the way we ended up launching Bento, which came from a moment of desperation. We were like surrounded in a room full of inventory, not knowing how we were going to like make next month's rent. And I remember turning to my then CMO, Annie, and I was like, Annie, what if we just like emailed a bunch of our customers who came to these trunk shows and said, like, we're going to just ship you a bunch of dresses, like keep whatever you like, return whatever you don't like, and see if they keep anything. Mm-hmm. And we did that, and we sent this email, and we ended up making more money in that 1 week through that box, which we ended up calling Bento eventually, than we had any month leading up to it. And it was this moment where the customers were like, oh, thanks for reaching out. Yeah, I've been meaning to order. I just like haven't had the time. Like, sure, send me whatever. And it was like, she didn't have to think about like what color she was going to buy or what size she was going to buy. We were doing all the thinking for her. Mm-hmm. And then Annie eventually was like, there's something really that's working here. I wonder if we should try this with customers who've never actually ordered from us before. And so we then sent them a survey, only really asking them questions that were like easy to answer. Like, what's a brand that you typically shop from? What size do you typically wear with them? Do you like to wear, bright colors, dark colors, what have you? And then based on that, we ended up sending them a box of clothing. And that was like people talk about like, what does product market fit and what does it feel like? I can only describe it for myself as like that was that moment where suddenly like making money, which up until that point had felt so difficult. And trust me, there have been many, many moments since then that have felt incredibly difficult. But that was the moment where I was like, wow, it's like money is just like coming through the door.
It clicked.
Yes, it clicked. So, I think my lesson there was like, it's not enough to just have like a good product. How you sell it, especially online, which can be so, so difficult, is just as important.
Fany, scaling up paletas is a lot different. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a very different industry, but I think it's also very competitive. And how do you stand out? And so for us, at La Newyorkina, so we have the seasonality, which has always been the hardest part because we also choose to do it in New York. I always say if we had the business, somewhere else, like, in California or something, we wouldn't have to do all these different things. And so we've tried a lot of, different revenue streams and different avenues. But the big kind of like what you were saying before, like the dream is to, seems to always be, well, you have to grow, right? And so one big sort of thing in our industry is getting your stuff into Whole Foods. And so for us, it was like, we got to get the paletas in Whole Foods. So first I was like, we can't compete with the ice pops that are there because they're made in huge factories and I will never have the price point. So I said, what can I do to differentiate? And so he said, let's do the minis. Right? And so there was nobody at the time making minis. Did a box that was square rather than rectangular because most of them are thinking, I'm gonna stand out. And then Whole Foods was sort of the goal, right? When you get into Whole Foods, then it can open a lot of doors. And then we were able to get into Whole Foods first, not that way, but through freezers. I said, great, we're gonna have a freezer like I've seen other companies do with other products, and that way it's going to be branded, it's going to stand out instead of competing in the shelf with other companies. But then the pandemic happened, and so our freezers were filled with other things that weren't ours, and of course then there's the upkeep of the freezers that we didn't anticipate, and a lot of things that you don't know. And fast forward a few years later, then we had finally our paletitas, but guess what? They don't like the fact that it's a different box because I think the consumer's going to like it because it's cute and it's, and it's going to stand out. It has these mini pops, which it's like the perfect treat, whether you're a mom and you want your kid to have just a little treat, or as an adult that you just want a little indulgence. And so they were like, no, but it doesn't fit. And so that's why most of the ice cream are similar, shape and everything. And then we were starting to realize that we were actually losing money being into Whole Foods. So this whole idea of chasing, this thing, and we hired some financial advisors, and we kept at the time also looking for a co-packer. Now I'm a chef by training, so the idea of somebody else making my product was very difficult. But we couldn't find one the one thing we were not willing and will never sacrifice is quality. And so when they said, you need to pull out of Whole Foods, I was like, what? But it took me years to get there. And now they want us, we're trying to figure out how to make it nationwide because of how we make it. Because everything is, we have a machine that helps us freeze it faster than a regular freezer, but that's it. It's not. And so, and we would have to charge so much. And, we have to sell it to a distributor that then sells it wholesale to Whole Foods and then Whole Foods to the customer. So we end up getting a really tiny bit. And so when we told the kitchen, okay, we're going to pull out of Whole Foods, they were like, but it represents like a third of our production.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And I said, I don't know. I'm also scared, but if we are producing and losing money, then, and guess what? Like, so we pulled out. And then that opened up all of these other like caterings and sort of more local opportunities. So I think, kind of like to your point, sometimes, you're just, whether it's you are focused on this one thing or you think this is the avenue, like in fashion, you thought this was going to be, and it isn't.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we're back, we're going to learn how Ariela managed to scale her company by making a pivot from a brick and mortar concept into a virtual one after COVID got in the way.
Simplify business travel with IHG Business Edge. Enjoy guaranteed discounts, flexible booking, and automatic IHG One Rewards Silver Elite status after your first stay. With access to 20 IHG hotels and resort brands worldwide, discover how effortless and rewarding business travel can be. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
Ariela, you pulled off an early pivot with your original brick and mortar plan. But before we get to that, can you just talk about the name change that, your company was originally called Real? And I'm sure that a name change is a lot of work. And talk about what that entails.
Sure. It is certainly a lot of work and way more work than I realized we were signing up for. Transparently, when we went through the name change, we felt that the company had gone through not just the pivot of brick and mortar to digital, but the pivot from a direct-to-consumer company and business to a B2B business. We sold to employers. And that came with so much more change than I thought it would as well. And so once, we had our foot in the door in this employer business, felt a real sense of like, this is now a different company and one that merits a new name. Never change your name. Wow, please pick the name you want to keep for life at birth, because, it's really, I learned live how long it takes to build a relationship, not just with your specific customers, that's easy and controllable to maintain, but rather like with the general world. Like, what is brand awareness? And we did face a lot of confusion from people at the time asking, oh, were you just acquired? And like, what does that mean for the product you're delivering or the relationship or contract we have with you? Are the same people still there? And I would have never guessed that that name change would have driven as much confusion as it did. And I don't think I appreciated how much brand awareness we had built with Real and how much was tied to the name Real. So my quick advice for people would be don't change your name. And wow, if you do, you need to give all the love in the world to your head of marketing who is doing that job, because ours, Olivia, deserves a trophy for the work it took to do that. And it's such an example of work that is underappreciated. There's just so many little things to remember to change your logo here and reach out to that one piece that you were written about here. And it's really pretty thankless.
Sure.
So the cut to is don't change your name.
Okay. And tell us just a little bit about the pivot from brick and mortar when the pandemic turned everything upside down for you.
Yeah, so that was years ago now, but we originally were building a brick and mortar business. And the idea was that we'd have brick and mortar locations that offered a monthly membership model, largely powered by group therapy. And in doing so, we would enable preventative care. You come always on a monthly basis, not just in moments of crisis. And in being group-based, one, it'd be more affordable. And two, we believed, and I still believe, the community is needed to really improve mental health and like the loneliness epidemic we're living in. So, we raised around, we built a beautiful location on Fifth Avenue, all set to open in April 2020. I'm 25 years old, like excited to launch my first company, and the pandemic hits. And, investors are texting, like, I don't think it's going to open. I'm trying to make sense of this. We're changing our therapist training from in-person to virtual, trying to make sense of the world while not leaving my own apartment for days on end. And what we ended up doing at the time was launching what we thought would be a 1-month offering of free digital care. And really, there was no brilliant hypothesis that this would pivot the business. This was like, bank accounts getting closer to zero, oh shit, what are we going to do? We have a full staff of clinicians in a moment of need. Let's offer care. And it was certainly thoughtfully organized and created on the back end, but the assumption would be this was just a 1-month offering. And we delivered that, and we ended up learning things we would have never learned in person, namely that a majority of people preferred group therapy over one-on-one, which was a hope but a surprise, because at that point, I think even now, most people don't really know what group therapy is, or they associate it with AA and only AA. But not only were they preferring group over one-on-one, they also were joining anonymously, with their videos off and with their names hidden, which was certainly not marketed as an option. They were sort of just self-selecting into that. And when we would survey folks to understand, why are you joining anonymously? This is a little weird of an experience for our therapists, for other clients or members. And they'd share, like, I want to hear how these issues show up for other people. And I want to hear how a therapist advises I work on this. I just don't want anyone to know I'm here. I don't want to admit that I'm facing, recurring nightmares, suicidal thoughts, an affair. And it really unlocked a new insight that was, or a question that was, can we give people the benefits of group therapy without them having to show their face and admit their issue? And not only can we do that, but can we do that? Would that be clinically effective? Would that treat depression? Would that treat anxiety? And it ended up pivoting our business entirely. And we set off what really felt like a multi-year research effort to understand, like, what are different forms of this anonymous group therapy? And how do we build an engaging experience so people want to come, but also one that drives clinical outcomes? And then came Real to Zeera, Consumer to B2B, and a lot of mistakes along the way.
How big were the therapy groups that you were facilitating?
Yeah, so I'll answer that, but for the sake of maybe knowing what I'll also say is we got way too scientific about it. Okay. We really, and I'm someone, like, I'm obsessed with mental health and I'm obsessed with people, and all I want to work on is that. I do not spend nearly as much time in, like, distribution and a lot of the side of the business that, like, a McKinsey brain would love. It's, like, not my thing. All to say, we got too deep into what are all the different combinations and how large can this get. And in doing so, we did find that we were able to make the experience fully one-to-many, right? Where there was essentially recorded content, audio content, and people were able to benefit from hearing the stories of other members, the tools from therapists without live joining a session. And I still, I'm so in awe and proud of the outcomes we found and delivered on. But I now find myself certainly questioning or analyzing how we could have done that better and maybe been a little less obsessed with the scientific study of it all, and maybe a little quicker to act on scale and the more, like, brass tacks business things.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I'm curious for you both. I'll have Sarah go first. We all learned so much in this founder journey about scale and far more things. If you can go back to day one of building the business and tell that Sarah your journey up until now, what would most surprise her about what that journey looked like?
Oh boy.
No pressure.
No, I've had so many lessons. Like, I feel I am having this, like, weird and probably rare experience of getting to build my business again with kind of all the lessons of the past decade, because COVID, in many ways, like, we were this, like, incredibly fast scaling business. We raised venture. It was also the time when venture capital firms were investing in consumer businesses. And then COVID basically, like, essentially came and destroyed that overnight.
Yeah.
And our revenue, I think, dropped more than 60%. We had to close all of our stores. We, between 2020 and 2021, end of 2021, ended up doing, like, 3 rounds of layoffs. And it was, like, it's just so painful, almost like taking this castle that you've built and, like dismantling it piece by piece.
Yeah.
And then in 2020, we were finally able to turn a profit. And since then, it's kind of been stacking them on one brick by brick, and also not without its challenges. Like, I shared this actually in Fast Company last year, but like we had this incident where our lender went under last year and just like completely like, I want to say like out of the blue, we had no idea that this was coming, and essentially like faced a capital call situation where I had to raise $3 million in under 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so like, there have been a lot of obstacles along the way, but I am still getting this like incredible, I think, second chance to do it the right way, I guess, in many ways, which is really not relying on enormous venture capital money, really focusing on the bottom line constantly. I mean, that's really all I think about. Someone said to me recently, like, revenue is vanity, EBITDA is reality. And I was like, truer words have never been said. And so it's really given me a different muscle. I think if I was chasing scale and growth, really leading up to that point, I am a fundamentally different operator now.
That's all for today's episode. We're going to pick up this founder group chat with Sarah, Fany, and Ariela again next week. Stay tuned to the Business Model feed on Monday, when my colleague Allie Donaldson will be circling back on one of the biggest stories in the world of business with an Inc. journalist. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on Inc.'s YouTube channel at youtube.com/Inc. Magazine.
I think that has kind of fundamentally altered the way I try to treat disaster. It doesn't mean I'm always successful, but it's like this too shall pass.
Welcome to the Business Model by Inc. I'm Graham Winfrey. It's Friday, and that means it's time for Founder Group Chat. Today's topic is coping with disaster. How do you handle the unexpected when scaling your business? And how do you keep yourself sane along the way? We're picking up our conversation on scaling a business with three founders who have done it. Fany Gerson, a chef and owner of several food businesses, Sarah LaFleur, CEO of fashion brand LaFleur, and Ariela Safira, whose mental health company Zeera was recently acquired. That's coming up after a quick message from our sponsors.
This podcast is brought to you by IHG Business Edge, where small and mid-sized businesses unlock exclusive savings at more than 6,600 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
As you heard last time on Founder Group Chat, one of our founders, Ariela Safira, was set to open a brick-and-mortar concept in April of 2020. Well, we all know what happened around then. But Ariela rose to the challenge and steered her company into a digital model that helped them not only survive the pandemic, but thrive and grow through it. All three of our founders have led their companies through the pandemic and countless other disasters of all kinds. And in this episode, they share what it was like, and as importantly, how they take care of themselves and their mental health. Here's some more of my conversation with Fany Gerson, Sarah LaFleur, and Ariela Safira. What was the most important lesson you learned from having gone through the pandemic and made that successful pivot about what your future would be like?
So there's the beautiful success lesson that is, meet the moment and be light on your feet enough that you can pivot and change, and that served us. But in the spirit of maybe being more real, what do I wish I knew then that I didn't act on is I think that the pandemic did already ask probably all of us to be so much more trusting of our teams than we naturally would be, since we're not seeing them or existing near them, and just sort of trusting people will show up and do the work needed. But I wish that I earlier in our journey, in my journey, I wish that I really honed in on what are the parts of the company I want to be doing or I'm good at doing, and earnestly let go of the others. And I think that I was just constantly involved in too much. You know, in last year's magazine piece that we did together, I unexpectedly ended up saying, like, you know, we all need to work on trust issues. Before that, I did not self-identify as having trust issues. Had some Freudian slip. But I do think I don't know if it was because of lack of trust or like I am so earnestly curious about everything and I love learning about things and I loved the company and wanted to be involved in everything. But what would have served the company and probably my own sanity was if I truly let go of so much more than I let go of and, you know, allowed for leaders to own those departments or projects fully. I think the company would have been better if I practiced that muscle a bit more.
Well, we're not in the middle of a pandemic right now, but we do have inflation, tariffs, general macroeconomic uncertainty. The question of what's the crazy headline going to be today? What are some of the uncertainties that kind of throw you for a loop every day, and how do you manage them?
Honestly,
Yeah.
I've taken a totally. So I mean, basically, I would say it's been a 12-year mental health journey. And I also had kids in 2020. I welcomed 3 babies. It's just another kind of crazy story to her twins via our incredible surrogate. I also miraculously managed to get pregnant after 3 years of IVF. And so there was like so much thrown at me between 2020 and 2025. And there were some like really dark times and dark days. And I went into 2025 being like, I'm not sure I will like make it through this year if I like fundamentally don't change what I'm doing. I'll just share like one of the things. I've tested and tried many things, but like, and it sounds so cliche, but I started seeing a mental strength coach actually with my husband, who's also an entrepreneur. That's a story for another time. With him, actually, and it's not couples therapy exactly, but he is a former Division I football coach turned mental strength coach, and he focuses a lot of his teaching on meditation. And so I've been really kind of consistently doing that for 6 to 7 months now. And I would say it's helped a lot. And to your point, like tariffs dramatically altered my business this year. Like at one point, the tariffs on the clothes that we wanted to bring in from China and Vietnam, where we were manufacturing 80% of this year's clothing, was 150%. So we just like could not bring in inventory for most of May, June, and some of July. And that's like fundamentally kind of, you know, disastrous for a clothing brand like mine. And I can't even remember if it was that or it was something else, but like I was having a panic attack in the supermarket, and I WhatsApped my coach and I was like, "Do you have 5 minutes?" And he was like, "Sure, let's talk." And I thought he was going to ask me like what was going on with the business, like what had caused me to have this like, you know, panic attack. And instead he was like, "Can you go to a quiet place?" And I was like, "Yes, I can go to my car." He was like, "Close your eyes, put your hands on your knees, and I'm going to take you through a 7-minute meditation." And like, it was like the first time I think in my journey where it was like I've seen different like therapists or counselors or exec coaches up until that point, and they always want to talk about the issues. But like the truth is like I can't even remember what the issue was right now, right? And it's really more about like how do I react to the issue, and like can I actually stay calm and level-headed and like not lose my head in the process. And so I think that has kind of fundamentally altered the way I try to treat disaster. It doesn't mean I'm always successful, but it's like this too shall pass. And do I actually have the tools to be able to deal with it? So
It's wonderful you found him.
Yeah.
He sounds
he's amazing.
I
He's
need the
amazing.
number.
Yeah, 100%. He is an incredible coach.
If you could go back 10, 15 years and tell your former self, you know, what is going to happen in your entrepreneurial journey that would be the biggest surprise, what would that be?
I think that we're still here, to be honest. You know, I always say like I became an entrepreneur by default. It was never, I'm not, still to this day, my, how you say it, my Achilles heel is I'm not business minded. My strengths are in the hospitality aspect and as a chef, and but I shy away from that. I don't want to know about it, and I know, like with time, like that has cost me literally, financially, but also I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and so I feel like I would tell like you're gonna go through so many more things than you realize. But you're going to, and against all odds, not just because that's not my forte or my interest, but because it's like, when I started, food has changed a lot, since I started. But also when I started, I remember I had a cart at Hester Street Fair, which was where my first paleta was sold. And I had tajin, which, salted chili in the cart. Nobody knew what it was. And like, what am I supposed to do with this? And now, like a lot of people, it's like a huge brand, in the States and worldwide that you put it in. But people are like, well, you put it on a popsicle? I'm like, yeah, you put it on a popsicle. So not just because of all those things. So it came like an educational aspect of the product itself. In New York, what's great about it is that people are always seeking those. But at the same time, it's very competitive. People are like, oh, this is great. Oh, there's something new. Oh, wait, let's go there. And our kitchen flooded in Hurricane Sandy and lost everything that we had built at the time. And so we've gone through like a lot of things. That's just in the popsicles. And then in the donut world, I had a very sort of trite story that I can't really get into, into it for legal reasons. But, kind of like the people I say very trite because it's sort of the creative gets screwed by people that have the money. But in the end of the day, the biggest lesson there is I made the mistake of signing a contract I should have never signed because I trusted a lawyer. And I didn't listen to my dad. So if I would, to change the question a little bit, if I could go back and tell myself something, would be to listen to my dad.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we're back, we'll get into the psychological costs of entrepreneurship and what Sarah, Fany, and Ariela do to manage it.
Simplify business travel with IHG Business Edge. Enjoy guaranteed discounts, flexible booking, and automatic IHG One Rewards Silver Elite status after your first stay. With access to 20 IHG hotels and resort brands worldwide, discover how effortless and rewarding business travel can be. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
Well, one of the most popular magazine stories Inc. has ever published is titled The Psychological Cost of Entrepreneurship. And I'm just curious whether you, Ariela and Fany, have ever been similarly intentional about, okay, just to deal with the mental health that I'm dealing with of being a founder, I need to go in the room and meditate or get up in the morning and go for a run, or what are some of the ways that you kind of keep yourselves sane being a founder?
I probably have more examples of me losing sanity than maintaining it.
Anything for you, Fany?
I have a 7-year-old, and I really try to very purposefully, is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like try to see the world through his eyes. So when I'm in this like just funk and like he just says so many things that are so wise, I'm like, it's like a little Buddha. Sometimes like, and so I try to be, sometimes like when my father passed away a little over 2 years ago, and I was just, I'm gonna try to hold it together. So, he had never seen me that way. Like he was, I was just destroyed, and I really didn't want him to see me that way. And he was just like, "Mommy, just breathe." I mean, I'm translating, but he said, "Just and just breathes like, can I hold your face, you know? And so he held my face, and I'm like, and I can't even say yes. And he says, just smell, smell the flowers, blow out the candle.
No.
Smell the flowers. And it was like he knew this perfect thing to say. And I find myself in many moments like remembering that, like to smell the flowers and blow the candle. So it's just, and he's a very sort of wondrous kid. And I remember like this moment when he was like 3 or something, and we saw the shadow of these leaves, and we were just like not just looking at the shadows, but like making up a story. And so it's kind of like stopping those moments and to just, okay, let's just remember the shadows and the flowers and the like all these things, to kind of be still. And yes, also exercise, and for a while I did boxing. That really helped. But for us, kind of to go back a little bit.
Oh, that's meditation.
Yes, it's an informal meditation. And we like things that always keep us up. I work with my husband, and he's a hemophiliac. So we have to pay our own health insurance, through the marketplace, Obamacare. I guess that's not the official name, but and that is a big thing for us because of his pre-existing condition, because he also has Crohn's. There's only one insurance that covers, like one plan in the entire marketplace that covers his medication and his doctors, and so we have to abide to that plan, and it's just really, really expensive. It's prohibitively expensive for us. So for us, it's like, can we even afford to stay living in this country? So that's one very concrete, that because we're entrepreneurs, so it's like, do you get another job just to have the insurance covered, but then you're not doing what you want to do, or what you're trying to do. And the other thing is, our industry, the backbone of our industry are undocumented workers from farm to table. And so that is really, when the pandemic happened, that was one of the first things that we thought about. What's going to happen? Like, how are we going to help our community? Nobody. And I remember I was in this Zoom call with, there's restaurateurs all over the city. And, this one guy who has, I think, like 7 restaurants, he said, honestly, I never thought about how policies can affect, most of my workers. And in my mind, I'm like, really? Like, it's not, but it's just not top of mind, because when you're not an immigrant, it's just, you don't think about that. Not because they don't care, but it's not in their radar. And so we started making tamales to donate to communities. I was like, we just gotta do something, even if it's like our own little way. So for us, a big part is like beyond our little, businesses, but it's more all of these changes that you don't know the next day. How do we protect them? Families of our workers, or just communities in general. And the way we try, like, we work a lot with an organization called Mixteca, which is a non-profit organization in Sunset Park, and they give aid. And it's just whether it's information or trying. But the thing is, right now, even the laws aren't being followed. So even if you are able to get somebody aid to, because they're gonna deport someone, it's like this really big thing that I'm like, how do we? And then even like talking about it is like, are you risking somebody because you're talking about it, kind of thing. And so those are the things that are beyond just being, and that we think about because we're entrepreneurs, but it's not necessarily directly on the business, if that makes sense.
So we might have to change the title from Founder Group Chat to Founder Group Therapy. Thanks. Group therapy session achieved.
Yes, totally.
Well, Ariela,
Something there.
as a mental health entrepreneur, what are some of the mental health hacks that you can share with others?
Yeah. I mean, when I think of my journey in running the company, it would take time and for me to recognize the moments I was most in need and what I might need in those moments. And I'll speak for me personally that up until it's called like the last leg of the company, like the acquisition process itself, going into that, I just had an awareness of this is this is going to be really stressful. This is very comparable to a fundraising process. And I know those have been stressful. So I didn't do this at any other time of the business, but at this point I'd learned and was really clear with my close friends of, these next 3 months are going to be really hard and would love your help in helping me feel less panicked during it. And while they all showed up in various ways, really what felt so meaningful to me is two of them, Sophia and Nats, would really just text me saying, "You're safe. Like, just so you know, you're safe." And I'm living in like 2024 in New York City. Of course, my like physical safety was not at risk, but as I'm sure we all can relate to when you're in those moments of high stress conversations, managing multiple, navigating board dynamics. God, I mean, I'll speak for myself. My brain is like on fire in those moments. And I certainly in those moments feel so unsafe. And like you might as well tell me I'm physically unsafe because of where I'm at. And having two friends who will text and call and show up at my door and say, like, "You're safe. Hey, like this whole thing can collapse and you're totally good. We're good. We're fine." And it's pretty vulnerable to even share that. But I think back to even like the last year of the company, and what I think of visually is seeing texts from the two of them that just say, "You're safe. Just so you know, you're totally safe." And so, I do think community is a big part of mental health care. I don't think there is a like hack in terms of like do 6 jumping jacks and your depression's cured. Would love if that were the case. Would have built that business 5 years ago. But I do think feeling supported by your people and part of it is just even building the type of relationship where you can share something as vulnerable as like, I feel really unsafe in these moments. And as cheesy as this sounds, I need your like help in helping me feel better or safer. And I don't know if that works for everyone. Like maybe what your version of that might look different than mine, but finding those people who also might have like witnessed you in those highs and lows and known like, oh, I see where this goes, is a very beautiful relationship to have and a good mental health hack, I guess, to have in your back pocket.
So founders should all have a group chat that they can turn to and vent
They should,
to. And,
yeah.
it seems like text is a impersonal medium, but just getting that out and not keeping it inside, I think, is probably something all founders should try to do.
Yeah, I have mine. It's literally the text group is called Fashion Survivors Group. Yeah, and it's so funny because it took me a few years to find my people. And there's like a lot of, chest thumping in any business, right? Any entrepreneurial world. And it took me a while to find my people who were totally willing to let their guard down and like tell you exactly like it is.
Yeah.
And conversely, like also celebrate the wins with you genuinely.
Yeah, I think
the genuinely is really, yeah. And thankfully I, I've been able to, yes, you're right, because misery loves company, but the opposite you also hope for in your survivors group. So
Something I'll add to that is I certainly have my founder friends who are supportive and helpful in a million ways. But I personally, my closest people are so far away from venture, thank God. And I benefit so much from, even if we're not talking about work, just entering the social environment with them where they're like, I don't know what a valuation is. I don't care what the valuation is, And like what I'm wondering is,
tequila.
yeah,
totally.
And I think that I mean I've never been anything but a venture-backed founder basically, but I think that venture in particular can be so what's the word?
Insular or?
Like we have our heads up our asses, like it's such a self-obsessed. It's just an insane
navel-gazing.
journey.
Yes.
Like it's a wild little microcosm of the world. And again, I benefit from and love my founder friends tremendously, but it's real. What I often need in the role is exiting this like tiny microcosm where you think the world will end if this startup ends, and having your best friends who, one's working on marketing Oreos and the other's like a writer working on Death Penalty, and like the other's a chef and the other's a lawyer, like having them have a conversation with you and not even know how to use the terms and the references that you think are like the Bible in that moment is really healthy. So I do believe everyone needs their version of like your Founders Survivor group chat. And hopefully conversations like this one can offer something similar, but also like, please have friends outside of this.
That's all for today's episode. We're going to pick up this founder group chat with Sarah, Fany, and Ariela again next week. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and on Ink's YouTube channel at youtube.com/inkmagazine.
You need to find a way to remove yourself from the company so that you're able to grow it. Because if you're in it 24/7, I know you can't afford it, but there's going to come a point where you can't not afford it.
Can't scale a company alone. As you're building, you'll need to hire the right people for the job. Welcome to The Business Model. I'm Graham Winfrey. On this week's Founder Group Chat, I speak once again with Fany Gerson of Newyorkina, Sarah LaFleur of LaFleur, and Ariela Safira, whose mental health startup Zeera was recently acquired. We'll hear how these three successful founders built the human infrastructure of their companies after the break.
This podcast is brought to you by IHG Business Edge, where small and mid-sized businesses unlock exclusive savings at more than 6,600 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
One of the first decisions you have to make is who to hire for your team in its early days. When you were first starting your companies, who were your first hires? I'll ask you first, Sarah.
I would say like anyone who was like crazy enough to join me on my journey is, I mean, the way I'd put it. But I started a fashion brand not knowing a single thing about fashion. I'd like not worked a single day in a clothing store. I, had like sewn a dress in home economics class. Like that was about it.
What made you want to start it? Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's a good question. My mother did work in high-end fashion. So I kind of, through her, got to see, what these like beautiful tailored suits looked like. She would let me touch the fabric. She would talk to me about construction. And so I felt like I got an education from her. But I never in a million years thought I would go into fashion. But I think when I started working, my first kind of real job out of school was in management consulting, and then I worked in finance, and I was like appalled. I really was appalled at the options that were out there, and I couldn't believe how much money they were charging for it. And the fabrics were not good quality. The sewing was not great. The fit was terrible, and I was like, someone needs to do something about this. And like, to make a very long story short, I ended up getting this job that I thought was my dream job. It wasn't. I like ran out of there, and I thought I had destroyed my resume because I had job hopped a couple of times, and I was like, no one's going to hire me. I have to go start my own company. And I had always had this idea that women, that clothing for busy, professional women could be done better. So it was, I don't think I would have started this company were it not for like other doors being slammed in my face. But knowing that I didn't have that background and knowing, I think, what I knew from my mom's world of experience, I was like, I really want to work with a high-end fashion designer. I want someone who designs for using the highest quality fabrics and works with the best factories, but I want to offer it at a price point that most working women can afford. And So I went to, a bunch of headhunters. Nobody had the time of day for me, except one who really decided to take a chance on me. And he was like, I heard this online thing is going to be huge. So let me see if I can help you. And he ended up introducing me to my founder. And her name is Miyako. She was the head designer at Zac Posen. She had worked for a bunch of high-end fashion brands. And, she had just gone through the recession in 2008 through 2010, and she saw all these beautiful fashion houses kind of collapse left and right. And I think she was really wondering what the meaning of fashion was, and she would always say I spend so much of my time designing for the runway, never to actually see the clothes on the street. And and then here I come along and say hey, there's a bunch of women who would really, really want to wear better quality, stylish clothing. Would you design for them? And so I think she just thought it was a fun opportunity. I never think in her life she thought it would turn into a 12-year-long journey. And she actually, we like to say, graduated the company at the beginning of this year. And so I have now a new creative director. But that is how I went about finding my first employee and my partner.
And what about hiring freelancers or consultants before committing to a full-time hire? Haven't you done that in the past?
I mean, yeah, exactly. Miyako actually came on as a freelancer.
Okay.
I had about $35,000 saved. My parents very generously lent me $35,000 as well. So I started with $70,000, and I carved out $10,000 of that to pay this design partner, design freelancer I wanted to hire. And that was Miyako. So Miyako designed... It's a 7-line of dresses for $10,000, best $10,000 I ever spent. And then we were just simpatico. It was very clear. And so then she eventually came on full time.
What about your first hires, Fany?
I was trying to remember because I feel my first not hires, but were friends who were volunteers or that I would, I'm I don't have money, but I'll cook for you or I'll, and so it was, I think I put an ad out and I asked friends in the industry, and I've had employees that have been with me for 15 years, 11 years, 12 years. And I think and most of them, once we had sort of a solid, it was, okay, who do you know? And for the most part, most of our employees in the kitchen are women who are Hispanic, not just Mexican, that are older. And that's just, that's just how sort of the makeup of them. And it really is like a family, and we're very hands-on. But it was a long time till I actually hired someone because I was doing everything. And I remember I used to rent a kitchen, a hot bread kitchen in Harlem. And my friend Jessamine, who was sort of the founder there at the time, she saw me in the morning one day, and then she would see me go in and out, and she stopped me and she said, "So let me run through your day. What did you do today? Because I saw you go to the market." She said, "So you went to the market, then you made the paletas, then you packed them, then you went to do a delivery, then you came back, and now you're making more, and now you're cleaning this, and now you're..." She said, "I'm going to give you an..." I said, "Yeah." She's like, "I can't afford to hire anybody. And I have to pay you rent. Do you want to give me free rent?" And then also the machines weren't working in that place. So things were melting, and then I ended up having to move to a different kitchen because that's a whole other story. But she said, "I'm going to give you an advice." And she's like, "You need to find a way to remove yourself from the company so that you're able to grow it. Because if you're in it 24/7, I know you can't afford it, but there's going to come a point where you can't not afford it." And that's still, a struggle, because kind of to your point that you want to be in it. And I go in there, my siblings always make fun of me. When I go to the donut shop, I also used to have a brick and mortar for Newyorkina that I closed down in the pandemic. So I can relate. It was very painful. And I come in and they're like, "You're like a whirlwind. You go in and you just move stuff around." And I'm like, I don't understand why this little thing doesn't bother them, that it's,
Yes.
it's like the tiniest thing, or that the label in such donut is not perfectly straight, or, but
Yes.
And so transmitting that and having sort of letting go of that control and understanding, like, you work in the business or on the business. And I think that's always, at least for me, kind of a back and forth
Oh, wise words,
thing.
Fany.
When you were making your first hires, what did you take from your experiences in restaurants as knowing who you worked well with and what kind of attributes you're looking for in hiring other people?
So I knew that the industry has changed a lot, but I also knew, even though I went to culinary school, I didn't want to hire people from culinary school because I said, they're gonna leave me after 6 months or a year, and I need somebody to stay longer. I can't offer them because they're sort of like these. I think in the past, like, decade or so, or maybe a little longer. People out of culinary school, they want to show in your resume, like we would get resumes of people that were in these amazing restaurants, but they were like 6 months here, 6 months there. And I that is not the kind of employee that was good for me. And so I knew that wasn't going to be a right fit for us. I also knew that it was going to be a Spanish working kitchen, most likely, and that I wanted to work with immigrants. And so it was sort of like things started aligning. But it wasn't that if somebody wasn't, like, I remember one of our restaurant places was actually Japanese, And he was just so excited. He had never worked in kitchens, and he just really wanted to learn. And I said, okay, of course, like anybody that's excited. For me, I don't care, and I've never cared if they don't know how to do anything. The main thing is that they are excited and they're passionate about it, and I can teach them. Sometimes it's a big learning curve, but I feel that those are the main characteristics, So it's not that if they weren't Spanish speaking, they're not, but it's more like I know that they would. Sometimes maybe they would not feel like they're a right fit because they don't speak the language, but they're excited to learn. And so for the most part, that's just how it's happened to be. But yeah, it's just someone that's eager to learn and excited about what we're doing and to be part of it.
Beautiful.
You liked people that were kind of dedicated to the mission, the mental health, mission. What did you learn about what you look for in new hires?
Yeah, I was certainly pretty passionate about bringing on people who cared deeply about the mission. And for us, especially in the first few years, that was so needed because the product did change. In fact, it tremendously changed from a brick and mortar membership business to this digital app experience. But what held true is the thing we're all committed to and everyone's signing up for is how can we make people more mentally well? Or how do we make mental wellness an essential part of well-being? And if we're all dedicated to that, we'll be able to pivot together, understand why we're pivoting, make decisions and pitch ideas that are aligned for the same shared mission. And I think we brought in pretty untraditional people who work together at the company were from very different industries. I mean, our first hire was our creative director, Reese, and she. I have so much love for her. Came on before we even had funding. My God, I was 24. And it's like, how much do these things cost? And she came from the beauty industry, and she was such an example of someone who just deeply understood what it meant to, I'm so big on, it's not about the clinical jargon. It's not about depression or anxiety or these clinical tools and assessments. It's people feel lost, right? And because life is long and hard things happen, people die, you lose a job. It's confusing to figure out who you are at all times. And what I want to do and what I want our company to do is to meet people in those moments and help you feel safer and more capable. And what I, as the CEO, looked for were employees who got that. I don't need you to tell me what the PHQ-9 is or whatever clinical tool.
I don't know what that is.
I don't agree with half of them. But I wanted people who understood people and who could be honest even in an interview setting of I relate to this because I think about when I felt most like I lost myself and didn't know who I was. And so all employees, certainly the creative director represented that, and she needed to, right? And like our brand identity, like you're capturing our essence. And I so deeply still believe that we need mental health care to be beautiful. Like a huge issue in mental health care is it's so sterile and like I walk into so many facilities and I'm like, I'm scared just sitting here.
I feel like it starts with schools, honestly.
Yeah.
I've never understood why schools are, for the most part, sterile. Why aren't there more plants and color and,
You know something that I love that's so relevant to this? I studied math in college, and one of my favorite professors had shared with us some piece of research he once read. I promise this is relevant. Some piece of research he read that would inform his lessons moving forward, which was that math and science books, math and science curriculum is so ugly. Right? It's like we don't have beautiful artists making these books, et cetera. They're black and white. We're still using chalkboards, whereas like the English department is looking more romantic. And what this research found is if you put smiley faces on math and science books and pages, et cetera, that students perform better. And there's just a feeling of like fear and hesitation that students bring to this otherwise like scary.
Imagine if you added color.
And so this professor, Keith Schwartz, he's actually a lecturer, not technically a professor, but he, on all of his slides, adds smiley faces. Oh. And I have to say, like his classroom, and he's also a phenomenal lecturer, but his classroom was just 30x more joyful than like any other math class I was in.
Power of the smiley face.
Power of the smiley face. And I think that, I would think about that throughout Reel and Zeera, of just like, when it comes to mental health care and talk about a system you're often meeting at your most depressed, at your darkest, et cetera. More than ever, you need yellow smiley faces. But that is not what an inpatient mental health facility looks like, right? When you look at most, whether you're in a hospital or a therapist office or looking at these therapy apps, they don't offer the warmth and love and care that even like fitness apps do. I used to say at the beginning of the company, I'm like, wow, SoulCycle is phenomenally more inviting and warm and loving than like a mental health office, and that's disappointing. I mean, and great for fitness. We've gotten people now to pay like zillions of dollars for a 20-minute cycling class. Amazing job on their part. My parents found that crazy. People pay so much to sweat for 40 minutes. Anyway, a long-winded way of saying our creative director was our first hire.
And she knew the power of a smiley face. Yes.
But the smiley face reminded me something which was very important, that, in terms of hiring, there's a lot of purpose and thought and care behind what we do, whether it's tacos, paletas, or donuts, like who we source from, why we do it, all natural, like et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, our goal is to make people happy. And so we always look to hire people that sort of embody that, that's like naturally aligns, that understands in terms of like the mission. Like, yes, this is what we do is not a necessity, in terms of sustenance, but it is, to bring things that bring you joy is a necessity. Mm-hmm. So we always look for people that, are excited about that, in a purposeful way,
I love that.
Something that's not likely to bring out a smiley face is the tough question that founders face as they grow. Are your first hires the best ones to help you get to the next level? We'll hear our panel's answers after the break.
Simplify business travel with IHG Business Edge. Enjoy guaranteed discounts, flexible booking, and automatic IHG One Rewards Silver Elite status after your first stay. With access to 20 IHG hotels and resort brands worldwide, discover how effortless and rewarding business travel can be. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
People sometimes say that the team that gets you to 1 million or 2 million isn't the same team that gets you to 10 million. Has that been true in your experience at all?
I hear the rhetoric a lot, and I do think it's true, but I think somehow the way it's positioned is like I think this is especially true in venture world. They always talk about you have to upgrade your talent as though somehow like the talent that got you from 0 to 1 is like
disposable or something.
Yes, or like not as good as the talent that's going to get you from 1 to 10. And I would actually go out on a limb and say the talent that gets you from 0 to 1 is like pretty freaking incredible. Like they are the people who are willing to follow you. I think I've shared this. It's a famous YouTube video about like how when there's like one crazy person dancing in the middle of the field, everyone just like looks at that crazy person like, what is wrong with him or her? And when another person jumps in and starts dancing like crazy with that person, everyone's like, huh, like maybe there's something happening here. Like maybe there's like a party going on. And everyone talks always about the founder and the founder being so important. But like I was like, the importance of that second person, the first follower, is deeply underrated. And so for me, that team that gets you from 0 to 1, the first followers, those are
Ride or die.
Ride or die. Like I will, like I can name my first 10 employees, all by name. Like they are so important to me. Of course, you can name your first 10 employees all by name, but like, they hold a really special place in my heart. And I think, I think it's exactly what you said. It's less about skill. It's more about willpower, and whether you're willing to see it through the dark times. Not that there aren't others after that, but 0 to 1 is really hard.
Yeah.
I agree 0 to 1's really hard. And the question is not, are those who are there for 0 to 1 good enough to be 1 to 10? I think they're completely different skill sets to create something out of nothing than it is to sell it. And I, as I've been reflecting on my journey, I do think like, wow, I love creation. I love creating. I love creating team culture. I love people. I love product. I don't love sales, and I'm such a terrible person to have in those meetings. I'm like probably yawning a little bit. Like I'm just so bored with like, okay, everything McKinsey people talk about. I'm like I'm over it. Yesterday, and it's so not offensive that someone else. I'd be thrilled to meet someone who loves that and who could take this beautiful thing and effectively scale it. And I don't know what this answer looks like in terms of the founder seat. Like I would go as far as to say like, the 0 to 1 employees, many of them don't want to do the jobs of 1 to 10. Some might want to, but not have the skills because they're different. But also the founder might not be the right CEO for 1 to 10. And the right CEO, or they might not enjoy the job 1 to 10. And I believe it only works when you have enjoyment for that role. So I haven't figured out how do you effectively make that transition work. And maybe part of it starts with like the leader being able to speak personally and say like, I'm not always sure if this, you're always the founder, but to lead the organization is a very different job when there's 10 employees versus 50 versus 100, and I'm sure 1,000, 10,000. So that's my 2 cents. How would you think of it, Fany?
I think the same way. I'm not like that far yet, but I do think like I am not the right person to lead that growth, but that I had such a terrible experience with my partners when I had the other donut shop we won't mention, that I feel like, like scared, and who do I trust? And I learned a lot.
Have I mentioned trust issues?
And so I feel, and I've also seen a lot of friends and peers that have been very successful, like even right now, like have multiple restaurants and they close seemingly from one day to the next. So I often wonder, is scaling the best? Like I think about Eric Ripert, who owns Le Bernardin. He has 1 restaurant. That's it. And, he's extremely successful. And so I think that it's also changing the mindset. And really, I feel like I'm in a point where is the goal the 1 to 10? Or is it balance? Or is it stepping up? But I know that if that ends up being the goal, I am not the right person.
Yeah.
But I feel like I would need to be and understand that my creative vision has to be,
Totally.
like there.
Something I would advise all founders to do, and I wish we all were better at this, is asking, like, what is your goal? Because I think as a founder, it's sort of, for some reason, natural to assume like the goal is to keep growing, just keep going.
Or sell.
Or sell, yes.
You
But
know.
just like the number of customers has to keep going up. And now when I work with founders, I like really push them to answer, like, what do you really want? And, there's certainly examples. I'm like, I hope you love this. Someone's a chef. I hope you love this craft so much that having an extraordinary restaurant that is consistently full and filled with people who are obsessed with your food, or everyone's different, but there are many people who are more than fulfilled with that. And then there are people who want to see that scaled into like cookies that sell into the Whole Foods, et cetera. But ask yourself, like, what am I really trying to get out of this? Because I think it's really easy. I mean, definitely in the venture world, just be like, just keep going, like sell or IPO, and even start by asking, like, maybe you need that. Like, maybe you want your one restaurant. That's amazing. And
be part of a neighborhood and be part of, so
yes.
I think it doesn't, scaling, I agree with you. It's just so embedded, like, well, you open because you want to scale and you want to sell, and that has to be the goal.
We'll pick up this founder group chat next Friday for one final chat with Zeera, Fany, and Ariela. The business model returns Monday when Ben Sherry circles back on this week's big story. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on Inc.'s YouTube channel at youtube.com/IncMagazine.
Now I talk to founders who are asking for advice, and it's like they haven't even built the product. And they're like, exit strategy. I'm like, wow, girlfriend. Wow, we were different.
The idea of making an exit can bring out all kinds of reactions in founders. Some never want to think about it. Others are putting a target sale price into their launch plans. Wherever you fall on the exit strategy spectrum, today's founder group chat has something for you. I'm Graham Winfrey, and this is The Business Model. For our final roundtable on scaling a business, Ariela Safira, Fany Gerson, and LaFleur are back to talk exits. Zeera and Fany are still running their companies, but Ariela has already completed an exit on her mental health startup, Zeera. We hear the inside scoop on her exit after a short break.
This podcast is brought to you by IHG Business Edge, where small and mid-sized businesses unlock exclusive savings at more than 6,600 IHG hotels and resorts worldwide. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
So, Ariela, you're the one founder here who has been through the exit process. Talk about what you were thinking in terms of the ultimate goal for your business in the early years, and did you have an exit strategy when you wrote your business plan?
No, certainly not. And I didn't think there was ever an end. Like I was just obsessed with solving mental health care, working on mental health care, and had, to an extent that someone could fairly call me naive. I was just on a team. Like, I'm so excited and passionate about working on this, not thinking of there's no end. We're going to do this forever. To the point that when those conversations came up sooner, I really responded from a place like, why would I ever stop doing that? Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I think some part of that is helpful or true, which is like, I personally am very passionate about mental health care. I am still really passionate about it and still want to work on it. The passion that I have for mental health care is different than the business that is created. And when I look back, I think that advice would have been, it certainly was offered to me by that advice, but I was just so blind and pretty obsessed with how do we solve this, and frankly, just a lot of exhaustion from the company, and realizing that there's still the Ariela Safira who loves mental health care and wants to work on it. Like, she still exists, and that is still real, separate from this business exiting, was a new realization for me 5 years in. And that's what ultimately would lead to us selling. But no, in the beginning, I mean, I know founders, now I talk to founders who are asking for advice, and it's like they haven't even built the product, and they're like, exit strategy. I'm like, wow, girlfriend. Wow, we were different.
So how did you make that turn from never want to sell?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, to be real, burnout was a big part of it. And being burnt out, we had also had to do a number of layoffs, and I did not have the backbone to keep going after so many. So I think the real story is just like I was just a human on the other side of it, being like, I don't know how much longer I could. Like, I don't know if I can do another year of this right now, let alone 5, 10, etc. And we were, up against, we were going to do a fundraise, which is a real marker of like, so you're signing up for 5 to 10 more years, if not 100. And I know what I'm like when I'm fundraising, ready to spend the rest of my life on this. And also investors know what I'm like when they meet a me who's ready to do this forever. So I felt it was pretty evident in the journey of like, could I really look someone in the eyes right now and say, I'm going to give 10 more years to this? No, I will give 1 million more years to mental health care, but I really need a break right now. And that's sort of the shortened summary version. And we're fortunate that I worked out with timing and had a board who supported and were certainly along for the ride, including the exhaustion and burnout that came with it. But I did not go into the experience thinking that I didn't think beyond the next day. Sometimes I wasn't even thinking of the next day.
Did you field unsolicited interest, or did you have to go out and say, we're up for sale?
We fielded unsolicited interest. Over the years I did. It's funny, I'm still young, but I was really young when I was 24 when I started the company. So I think of times that people reached out to acquire the company, and I took part in those conversations, didn't quite understand. Again, my brain was so on like, but I'm doing this forever. So like, what do you mean you'd want to acquire? Like, what does that even mean? And part of it was truly like, I didn't go to business school. So I was like, literally, what do you mean? What does that mean?
Let me look it up.
I was like learning what churn meant as well. Like we were really figuring out business 101. So it was, we like had, at that point, there were a number of people we had conversations with. So it wasn't by any means a fresh new effort we've talked to many of these people before and knew what they were interested in, what they weren't interested in, which allowed the process to be faster than maybe it otherwise would have been.
Fany, you've had several different ventures. How do you think about the future in Newyorkina?
Oh, I mean, as we were talking before, a lot of it is more in a personal way. Like, do we have to leave the country? So now that changes everything, and it's, but we don't want to close the businesses. So what are the different options? And we've looked, a lot of people have offered us through the years, like franchising. I don't like the franchising model.
Because of quality assurance issues?
Okay. Exactly. But we've also been offered licensing overseas. So those are things that we're exploring now, like, in places like Japan and I would maybe open in Mexico City, and sort of see, okay, what are the parts of the businesses? So right now it's sort of, we're doing the opposite. Instead of scaling, we're editing and we're tightening, and kind of, okay, let's see where we're at and what does that look like in a personal level. And I never thought about it in exiting in any scenario. Is more, this is something that maybe our son could inherit if he wanted to, but then he may have his own, like my dad had a family business, kind of those things. And he's going to have his own passions and things. But it was sort of something that we could give, because also it's, for us, it's not just like the product. It's what are the values and the things, the organizations that we support. So if we, we're exploring options. Do we maybe partner up with a different restaurateur or operator here? But right now we're trying to sort of tighten and, evaluate in a personal level, like the healthcare, like as I mentioned before, which is the most important thing, and what would that look like? So we're thinking perhaps of going to Mexico for a year, and kind of test it out. Can the business do back and forth and set up systems? Maybe it's like, oh no, there's a saying in Spanish that's que tenga tienda que la tienda, which rhymes, but basically it's like if you have a store, you better be present. So kind of like you got to be, and we've always been hands-on, so it's setting up these systems, and so we don't know. That's a very long answer to say we don't know. We still always exploring, and I keep going back, like, even if we found a co-packer that could do the quality that we have, that we want, and that we do, I don't know if that's what we want. There's days that I wake up, I'm like, we could totally be the Mexican Häagen-Dazs. You know, Häagen-Dazs is amazing in the sense you find it in a deli or you find it in like very high-end supermarkets. They have this, you know, and it's consistent and it's great, and very few people have been able to sort of do it that way. You have sort of like the high-end, you know, gourmet ice creams, and then you have the more, but this is sort of like taps a lot of different ones. But I love hospitality. And so while on the one hand, I would want everybody to be able to get these paletas everywhere in the country or maybe even further, there's so many points because there's so many breaks in the chain of cold, you know, the cold chain, that there's a possibility that when you get your paleta, it's not a good experience. And it's not because the product is bad, but because the
Melted and refroze.
It melted and refroze. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so where's that? You're detached from the customer, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's another aspect, because it's like a whole different business, you know? And I've also I met this woman who has this really delicious ice cream called Dolcezza in DC. And I took a financial literacy course last year with the James Beard Foundation, and she gave a presentation, and she's like sort of like the ideal. You know, she has, I think, 5 or 6 shops in DC and makes her own ice cream. But then she did a co-packer. She went through a co-packer, and she was nationwide in, I don't know, like 1,000 stores, like really, and it was all self-funded. And I saw it when I was trying to decide whether to pull out of Whole Foods or not, knowing in my heart that it was the right decision. And after her presentation, I said, I am gonna pull out. Because even though like she had the best case scenario, and she talked about how much money she had to spend just on promotions, because you have to have these, you know, when you have like sales, not the slotting fees, which is also a thing. Like when you go to the supermarket, there's these things, for those who may not know, there's a reason why you always see the same product like right eye level or right when you're exiting all over the country, you know, because they pay to be there. And so those are slotting fees and for people to go. But then there's a separate like promotional things. And I can't remember the number, but it was something like $500,000. And I said, if you have to how much ice cream do you have to sell to just make up for that? That's money you won't, you know, the margins are very low. And so I saw her a few months later, and I said, thank you, you know, and she said, oh, I didn't want you to make a decision based. I said, no, it was good. And she told me this thing, like, again, she was top of the mountain, you know, like amazing. Her co-packer, there was some kind of, I think it was listeria, not in her products, in another line of ice cream cakes, I think.
In the same co-packer facility?
In the same co-packer facility. But the way that normally works is you know, they shut that line down while they do the investigation. But it was a very aggressive person who apparently has a reputation of shutting places down. And they ended up going bankrupt, this co-packer. And all of these companies, like all of these ice cream companies, there was Marco's Ice Cream, who was, you know, growing, Jenny's had, like all of these companies, and he just didn't have enough coverage. And so, and it was in the beginning of the summer. So they lost millions of dollars worth of product. And I said, I don't have the stomach.
Yeah.
Like to your point, for this, like you're so detached from the control. Like when it works great, it's amazing. And so I don't think that that's the route. And so sometimes I think, oh, if I went back to Mexico and I did the same thing we're doing, the paletas, and we could just do events.
Yeah.
Like we could just do big events because people have huge weddings, and we do a lot of even now we do a lot of and that I love to do. We do a lot of collaborations with fashion brands and with liquor companies, spirit companies, and I love that because it's also, it challenges me in a creative way, and so I think it's more what do I want to do in my day to day.
Yeah.
But sometimes I still wake up and think we could be the Mexican Hagen.
You could be. Do you want to be?
Exactly.
You could be.
Exactly.
Sarah, when can we expect the LaFleur IPO?
Oh my gosh. I would never want to go public. We'll start there. But I am, there's so much to say about this. I thought you both gave me so much to think about. And I've definitely both thought exactly what Ariela's thinking. I've definitely thought exactly what Fany's thinking. I really do love what I do. And I know this sounds like so crazy, but the vision of the company is the world's a better place when women succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And our medium just happens to be fashion. And fashion is such a hard category. It's like what people say about acting. If you love anything else, go do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks, but I happen to love fashion. And I love the power of transformation that people feel when they find just the right outfit. And I'm obsessed with that feeling that we can give our customers. I was in Georgetown yesterday at our Georgetown store, and I saw that happen right in front of my eyes, where she was like, "Oh my gosh, look at me," I didn't know I could look like this. And anyway, so I'm obsessed with that feeling. Yeah, so I guess the long story is I'm in it. For some reason, it's actually not for some reason. I won't tell you why, because I feel ridiculous saying it. But I know I have another 12 years in me, to be exact.
So 12 years is when the IPO is happening. Okay.
12 years. Within 12 years, I have investors, and I am very serious about wanting them to have a return. So that I do feel strongly about. But I'm very much separating that from my willingness to want to, keep showing up every day, I guess. And right now I feel, despite the chaos of the tariffs and all, I feel energized.
When you have a mission as a founder, it's natural to have a drive to keep going, even after you exit. So why did Ariela take a 9-month hiatus after Zeera was acquired? We'll find out after the break.
Simplify business travel with IHG Business Edge. Enjoy guaranteed discounts, flexible booking, and automatic IHG One Rewards Silver Elite status after your first stay. With access to 20 IHG hotels and resort brands worldwide, discover how effortless and rewarding business travel can be. Visit businessedge.ihg.com to learn more.
Ariela, you've been through the entrepreneurial mill. There's a notion that after a matter of time, you're going to start something else because you can't. Talk about your experience with that.
What's your next venture?
I'm excited to create again. I have the, if you call it an illness, whatever it might be. I certainly, there's so much I want to make. And I think mental health is a bigger issue today than it was 5 years ago. And for all the good that will come out of AI and our glorious new tech world, I also think there's a tremendous amount of loneliness and just bad that will come from it in terms of our mental health and human connection. So I don't know what I'll be building, but I care a lot about mental health. There's a number of things also outside of pure obvious mental health and just fun projects I want to create. Don't yet know which one, but I told myself that a board member advised I take 9 months off and truly fully off. It takes 9 months to make a baby. I'm coming back to life after. And I'm currently at month 7. and grateful that I took the advice, because 2 months in, I was like, oh, I'm starting a new thing now. And I was ready. I was ready to commit in April to start something new. And I'm very grateful that he really pushed me to not do that. So we'll be enjoying some more time off, like reading books that are not about mental health care and writing without the purpose of having a solution. Just
What
being
was
able
that
to
thing you
explore.
told us? I love that sentence you said when we were talking before, that you said to your brother. The title. It was
Move at the speed of handwriting.
yes.
Yeah.
I want to keep.
That's
or
a
sing with
beautiful
speed of
phrase.
handwriting.
I know. I'm going
I
to
wanna
put that
keep
in
it.
my head.
Yeah. I mean, I a lot of lessons around when you're not on your phone, your laptop all day. Wow, the brain can be a clear place. And I mean, certainly in terms of mental health, can get to know ourselves much more kindly and much more truthfully if we're not in this like on-demand autopilot mentality that we otherwise, I think, can operate in.
Last question for anyone is, we're in such a tumultuous period right now, volatile period right now, but they say that starting new businesses in recessions, challenging times is actually the best time to do it. Is there anything, not that you're going to start a new brand or a new venture right now, but is there anything that makes you think, now's actually a good time to try out some new product or something like that you've been thinking about?
I mean, it's funny that we just talked about like AI being our downfall and then talking about AI, but I am implementing a lot of it at my company. It is incredible, the power of what it is able to do. And
Design-wise, or
no, honestly, like more for like so I do think it just it enables our stylists to work better. Like often when like so much of our work with our customers is picking the right outfit for her so that she doesn't have to worry about it. And our systems used to be like you have to like literally go through their entire order history and like in your head kind of like be like, okay, she already has this, blah, blah, blah. And what AI is able to do is like, okay, she owns all of these products, and so like she's more likely to like this kind of item. This works back with that item, and like as a result, the stylists are much more interacting with the customer than she is like staring at a laptop. So I mean that's just like led to enormous efficiencies for us, and so I do feel like it's like this great leap moment. I mean, having had a company for a decade pre-AI and now being in a company where AI is just like so democratized, I like it's. I would have had a completely different P&L structure.
This is sort of like when you're in the food industry, you're always thinking, not just in the food industry, but I think very purposefully, to reduce waste, or how can you, reutilize this ingredient to do that. And I think that because of what's happening, I have this new goal, as far as I know, maybe there's more out there, but as far as I know, to be the first no food waste donut shop in the country. And I say no food because it can't be no waste, because we do packaging and we do, things. And so there's always like little things. So we have, for example, like signature hot chocolate, and we make croutons out of our donuts, unglazed donuts. And that's something we started, and so it became like a thing. But now it's like so much more purposeful. And so it was really funny because I texted someone, and I ended up texting the wrong Justine that I was trying to. And so it turned out, and she's like, oh, what are you up to? She's like a friend of a friend that was living here, but now she lives in Hawaii, has her own farm. Long story short, I'm going to hire her to help her. I mean, to help me, not help her, to help me as a consulting, because this is a lot of what she does. And so we're working through some problems. So I said, these are some of the things that I'm doing. So for example, like we squeeze a lot of lemons and limes, and some things we're going to be able to do at La Newyorkina as well. Because also we have to think about the regulations that exists, that there's certain things you can and can't do. depending on your Department of Ag or Department of Health. And so, for example, all the remains of the citrus, we are turning them into syrups that then we turn into something else. And then she's like, oh, well, sometimes but sometimes when you try to save something, you end up wasting more because you waste more time or more energy. But it's sort of to create all these ecosystems that, hey, actually, these chicken farmers love eggshells. Okay, so how can we do, so to create this ecosystem. So right now, because, circular economy. And she says, but not only to her point, she's like, it's not just about saving, in every way, in the environment or money, but actually to make sure you make money out of these things, because then that becomes also something people want to support or want to talk about.
Can I add one thing?
Please.
I've spent a lot of the past few months thinking about AI and all that it can do for society. And there's a tremendous amount of good it can do and that I believe in. And I also am seeing so many people turn to it and rush to it really thoughtlessly. And just certainly in the venture community, I think every tech company is doing it as quickly as possible. And I see it happening outside of tech as well. When I think of what everyone can do, certainly if you're a founder or a company leader today, it's of course, you understand your business more than anyone else, and you might be able to identify ways that AI thoughtfully, earnestly is helping the experience you want to create or the returns you want to deliver to shareholders. But what I hope we all can do right now is recognize this is a really pivotal moment for humanity and society. And we have now witnessed enough waves of technology and how it's really destroyed humans, human connection, relationships, mental health. And so I think what this time can be, if we choose for it to be, is a moment where we show up and stand up for just what is humanity and remembering what it means to build a quality life and a life where humans interact with humans and feel fulfillment from that. I don't yet have a recipe or an answer. I don't know if I ever will for what that can look like for all people. But I think as so many leaders jump in this moment to immediately wipe out workforces with AI as much as possible, I would encourage everyone to first ask, what am I trying to do? And if that's what you're trying to do, great. But I would love for everyone to just ask themselves first, what am I trying to create? What do I want to do with my one life? And let me answer that question before I replace my entire world with a hyper-personalized machine.
Definitely co-sign asking yourself that question before you just leap out and start a new business. Thanks so much to all three of you for being so generous with your time and sharing so many lessons from your entrepreneurial journeys.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to our first Founder Group Chat series. We'll be back again next Friday with an all-new roundtable, a new host, new founders, and a new topic. The business model returns Monday when Chloe Aiello circles back on this week's big story. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on Ink's YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ink Magazine.